What's going on, guys? This is Miasin. So today I wanted to make a full card review on super polymerization alongside its best applications and what decks should you be siding this in against or even main decking this against, because you do need a bunch of targets in order to make it live. So there's a lot of commitment. It's not like you can just blindly play this card and expect it to work. If you do not play the appropriate fusion monsters in your extra deck, this card is going to be doing nothing at all. It's very similar to Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries, Metal Tronius, Lullaby of Obedience, etc. All those cards that scale with how much preparation you put into them. Now, Super Polymerization is a card that at any moment can randomly turn into the best board breaker and potentially even the best card in Yu-Gi-Oh! So it's always a card that you have to consider. There is never going to be a format where Super Poly is going to be a card that we're completely going to be ignoring, because the next format, it might randomly just be the best one. Anyways, before we go into any of this explanation, make sure you smash the like and subscribe button. It really motivates me a lot to keep breathing, because if you don't like the video, I'm gonna die. Alright, so first things first, Super Poly is typically a card that is really good against combo decks, but against certain kinds of mid-range decks, it can be decent. For example, against even Tenpai Dragon when they're trying to OTK. Sometimes you can randomly just catch them when they have like, like Chandra and another monster, they go into battle phase. You Super Volley them away, and it's not like they can chain to Quick Sync and get some resources going. No, they can't really do much, so Super Volley can still be good against them, and it can also be good against Labyrinth, because they lose a lot of bodies, they lose that lady to be able to set that trap card if you can kind of chain block them in a way, because they do have to respond directly to their own normal trap card. And if you can remove their Lovely, then it's also going to be one less inconvenience that you're going to have to deal with. But usually you're going to be playing this against combo decks, which is one of the main reasons why, if you can only afford space for 2 cards, it's always going to be Garura and Mud Dragon. These are by far the best ones because they cover the most amount of ground. So Garura requires 2 monsters with the same type and attribute but different names, and Mud Dragon is 2 monsters with the same attribute but different types. So in other words, as long as your opponent plays a bunch of monsters with the same attribute but different names, you can always Super Volley them away. Regardless of the deck that it is, it's always going to work to some extent. The only way Super Volley is useless is if your opponent ends on a bunch of monsters with completely different attributes, or sometimes monsters that cannot be used as fusion materials. Phantom of Yubel is the one that I'm looking at. This card is a major inconvenience. But yeah, Garura and Mud Dragon, by far the best ones, and also very good cards to summon, because that's another criteria that makes Super Poly good. Sometimes it's not even about the removal, but rather the monster that you summon. Mud Dragon can be a great asset to break boards going second, because you can make it so that your opponent pretty much cannot target any of your monsters. If they're all the same attribute, you just go Mud Dragon, call an attribute, and then normal summon a monster, your opponent can't imperm, so your opponent can have all the negations that target, and it's not going to change anything, which is the main reason why I think Mud Dragon, personally, I think is the best, but depending on the deck that you're playing. But sometimes Garura can also be really good, because you link it off, you draw a card, it's a level 6, there might be some nice plays. Beatrice is banned though, so you can't do that. But yeah, it's a level 6 Dark, so I don't know, you can normal summon like a level 4 Light, make Chaos Angel. The world is your oyster. It's a great card for sure. The third best Super Poly target that you can play is the Predaplant Dragostapelia. This one's a little different from Garura and Mud Dragon because it's less generic. You do need to fuse away a fusion monster, and the other material is any dark monster. So this can shine in situations where Garura and Mud Dragon can't. For example, if you're trying to fuse away Fiendsmith DSE Ray, and either Unchained Soul of Rage and Varudras, it's gonna work out, so it's really good. And you can expect these cards to be in pretty much every single Yubel, Fiendsmith end board. The issue is, you need these 3 targets very specifically, because you don't know exactly what end board your opponent is gonna do. It depends on their hand. Sometimes they do completely different things every single time. Sometimes there will only end on 1 dark monster that can be Super Volleyed away, and the second one will be Phantom of Yubel, which doesn't count. So that's the reason why I keep saying, don't rely on Yubel, the Loving Defender, forever. They rarely end on a real Yubel monster on the board, so this card rarely gets to Super Volley everything away. Unchained Soul of Rage, Varudras, you really don't want these cards to sit on the field. They're absolutely terrifying. So if you can fuse away at least 1 with the DSE Ray, then you're in a decent position. The one issue with Dragostapelia is that if you fuse away the DSE Ray, it can use its effect to shuffle back, well, rather send a card on the field to the graveyard. They can out your Dragostapelia, and this card, I think people don't really understand how it works well enough. The negation effect of Dragostapelia is not an activated effect, but rather a continuous effect. So even if you change Dragostapelia to put a predator counter on something, if the Dragostapelia leaves the field after that, it's not gonna negate anything. So yeah, my issue with Dragostapelia fusing away DSE Ray is just the fact that you don't get the full value, because the Dragostapelia is just gonna go to the grave immediately. You're gonna be wasting 2 cards just to make your opponent lose 2 cards, but then you're also not gonna have a monster on the field. Whereas when you're sending off like Varudras and Unchained Soul of Rage to make something like Garura, or even Starving Venom, which is the next card on the list, at least you get a monster that sticks there. Now, Starving Venom is extremely good, because this card is one of the best board breakers out there. It's one of the most annoying ones to have to deal with, because if it's destroyed, you destroy every special summon monster your opponent controls, which is annoying, but also you can gain a lot of attack with this card, and you can also copy the effect, and I believe the name as well, of a level 5 or higher monster your opponent controls. So sometimes you can copy something that negates, and you're going to be in a good position. Now, against Yubel, I don't think there's anything that you can really copy, because, again, it only copies level 5 or higher monsters, and their only monster that has a level in the end board would be Phantom of Yubel, and unless you're playing a Yubel deck yourself, it doesn't really matter too much. Like, what are you copying? The fact that it can't be destroyed by battle? Nobody really cares. So yeah, just something, again, to keep in mind, but sometimes you can also crash this card and then break the rest of the board. So Super Poly fusing away a bunch of darks usually is going to be extremely good. And again, this is the kind of thing that you can play in against Labyrinth, and obviously in Labyrinth, because the extra deck space is very loose. Okay, so some more Super Poly targets that I actually think this one got a little worse over time. It's Earth Golem Ad Ignister. You need a Cyrus and a Link monster, and honestly, the effect is really weak. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's super generic, a Cyrus monster and a Link monster, so you can use IP Masquerade and any Link monster. My issue is that a bunch of the decks right now, what they're doing is they're not ending on a bunch of Link monsters on the field anymore. Back in the days, they were ending on Appaloosa, and they were trying to summon IP Masquerade on your turn, but Appaloosa is now banned, so you can't really rely on that anymore. So therefore, their end board, it's especially in the Fire King deck, they're gonna end on like Ambler Whale, Arvada, and Caesar, and it's not really super polyable with the Earth Golem Ad Ignister, but you can super poly them for fire only using the Mud Dragon, because it's Beast Warrior and Machine. So that's still really good, obviously. But if they have Kirin and a fire in hand, then you kind of lose, and unfortunately, it is what it is. And obviously, Caesar can negate Super Poly for obvious reasons, which is one of the main reasons why this card's insane. But yeah, Earth Golem and Ignister, I'm gonna tell you this right now. There's no reason for me to waste your time. It's not worth playing. At least not right now, but it has a lot of potential in the future. It could be good against Malice, just like this card right here, World Chalice Dragon Guardian Almadork. Yeah, that's a mouthful and a half. This one requires 3 Link monsters. So obviously, it's only really good against Cyber's decks. They're the only decks that I can think of that just spam the board with a bunch of Link monsters. Whether you're using Super Poly as a board breaker against them or as an interruption, this card's usually just going to perform extremely well. Now, I did skip over Predaplanche Verdum, but honestly, there's also nothing much to explain with that one. It just requires 3 dark monsters on the field. So it's a stronger version of Starving Venom, but also a more difficult version to summon. So it's not the main priority. Like I said, the top 3 priorities would be Garua, Mudragon, and Dragostapelia. Matter of fact, I kind of listed them in like the order of which ones you should play, but it's very malleable. It really changes depending on what people choose to play. Starving Venom usually is going to be the 4th Super Poly target that you can play just because of its effect, not because of the fact that it requires 2 dark monsters on the field, because Garou and Mudragon already covers that for you. Same thing with Dragostapelia to some extent. Now we got Memento Tikulen Tekutlika Creation King. You need 3 Memento monsters on the field, which is a lot. Usually you're not going to be using this as a board breaker because the Memento deck barely ends on any Memento monster on the field. They end on SP Little Knight, the Creation King, and sometimes the Silhouette Rabbit with the Chap card. So Super Poly against them going second, not the greatest, but going first as an interruption, it could be decent. You can catch them off guard and you can hold your Super Poly for very long, or you could also use it earlier and use 2 Memento monsters to summon the Twin Dragon. This could also be good. My issue with this approach is that if you are committing to playing Memento monsters to out the Memento deck, you might as well play both just to be able to adapt yourself to any position. Do you want to wait and infuse using 3 monsters and summon the monster that actually has an interruption that can destroy cards your opponent controls? Or do you just want to use it very early and just basically get a monster that does nothing? Unless you're playing Memento yourself and then you can get a little bit of advantage with the Twin Dragon. Well, by a little bit, I mean a huge amount of advantage. But I think it's win more. The Memento deck doesn't really need to do that unless it's like a Memento Tier 0 format, which I don't think is going to be the case. Right now, Memento is still a deck that is very low-key underrated. It's a top-tier deck for sure. It's one of the best ones, but not a lot of people are playing it. The next one is Mystery on the Dragon Crown. This is just such a weird card. You need a Spellcaster and a Dragon monster. Dragons are also losing a little bit in popularity because Burled Savage Dragon got banned, which is also one of the reasons why Dragon Knight Draco Equist is also way worse. And Spellcaster monsters, deadass, I can't think of too many. Perhaps Mystery on the Dragon Crown could be good against Despia. you fuse away, like, I don't know, like a dragon monster like Lubalion and like Blazing Cartesia so that they can't fuse for Albion the Sanctifier Dragon on your turn. But honestly, it's not that great, so I don't know if you really need it. But it does have a very good effect. If you can summon it, then you're going to be benefiting off of it. Cordy is the Triphasic Daemon. This one requires a Synchro, an Xyz, and a Link. So it's by far the hardest Super Poly target monster to summon. The thing is, if you summon this card, you pretty much insta-win because its effect is ridiculous. But I don't recommend relying on this card for Super Poly, and even if you have the space for it, it's not really worth it. However, in the Megatins, we're getting a TCG exclusive by the name of Heavy Polymerization that can summon this card going second. You do have to banish like a Synchro, an Xyz, and a Link monster from your extra deck, and then you summon this. You pay 6,000 life points, and you pretty much kill your opponent on the spot. If this card doesn't get stopped, it's pretty much a guarantee you win the game. Anyways, Dragon Necro, Nether Soul Dragon, you need 2 zombie monsters. Usually doesn't come up other than if you're playing against zombie or if you have Zombie World active. So it's a very niche Super Poly target. Dragonite Draco Equist, you need a Dragon Synchro and a Warrior monster. So it used to be really good when your opponents were ending on Borreload Savage Dragon and Baron de Fleur. But these cards now belong in the banned list, very rightfully so. So yeah, in other words, this card kind of just phased out, unfortunately. Or fortunately, it depends on how you see it. Guilty Gearfried, 2 warrior monsters with different attributes, used to be somewhat decent against warrior-based decks, and now nobody cares. And also, even then, it's not even that good against Infernoble because they do have to have different attributes, and that deck, for some reason, only summons warrior fire monsters. Panzer Dragon requires a machine and a dragon monster, so the dragons are usually kind of easy to summon. The machine is the hard part. I also can't think of like super generic machine monsters that people are always ending on in their end board every single time. It's gonna be the hard part for you to find. Embers of the Ashen requires 2 pyro monsters if you want to stop your opponent's Snake Eye deck very early on, which I do not recommend. I don't think this card's gonna be great, but its effect to recycle back a field spell from your graveyard to your hand is not too bad. Brotherhood of the Farfist Swan requires 2 Beast Warrior monsters. That's also not great. The effect, I don't really know if it's relevant if you're playing a deck other than Farfist. Aerial Eater, very interesting. You need 2 Fiend monsters with the same attribute, which is randomly kind of hard to summon because even against Yubel, you could fuse away, like, if they're trying to summon, like, if they're on turn 1, they summon, like, Dark Beckoning Beast and Samsara, you fuse them away, sure, that's fine. But if you're trying to break the board, Unchained Soul of Rage is a Dark, and Caesar is Waters, so it's not even like this works really well. But its actual effect is really good, so I've got nothing to say there. If you can summon the Aerial Eater, it's great, but it's not something that you can rely on, definitely. I don't know when we're getting it, but this card right here, Duke of Demise, is, I think it's a V-Jump promo, I forgot. It requires 2 Fiend and or Zombie monsters, so it single-handedly power creeps Dragon Necro Nether Soul Dragon, this card right there. It's gonna be way better, way easier, and way more generic to summon. And the fact that it requires 2 Fiend and or Zombie monsters means that at any moment you can fuse away Caesar and Unchained Soul of Rage, and that is insanity. It is extremely good. This is how you're beating Caesar, because this card being a water is the most annoying thing out of it. If it was a dark, Super Poly would have been in everyone's main deck, I think. But yeah, no, this card, you really have to be on the lookout for it, Duke of Demise. But again, we have no idea when we're going to be getting it. Anyways, for some now really niche targets, Chimera King, the Phantom Beast, it requires a Beast and a Fiend monster. The Fiend is the easy part. The Beast monster is really tough to have access to unless you are playing Beast yourself. So yeah, usually this is the kind of card that you actually summon in your deck, not really Super Poly into. Unless, of course, you're playing Chimera Fiendsmith, or I mean, rather Chimera in general. Bloom Prima, the Melodious Core, whatever. You need a Melodious Maestro monster and 1 or more Melodious monsters. So the really cool thing about this is that you can fuse away your opponent's full board regardless of what's even on your opponent's field. I actually think this is one of the better Super Poly targets, because even if your opponent has like 6 Melodious monsters on the field, you just get rid of all of them in one shot, and it's gonna gain a lot of attack, and it can make a second attack. If you only have the space for like 1 Super Poly target for the Melodious deck, well, that's the best one. I mean, you're obviously gonna play the other cards, but this one is literally an insta-win, because even if they have the lock with like Aria and the other one, Elegy or something, where none of the monsters can be targeted or destroyed by anything, it doesn't matter. That's a nice deck you got there. I'm still gonna kill you. And finally, we have Vision Hero Trinity. This one requires 3 hero monsters. The reason, obviously, why I'm talking about both of them is because this one is still good against Melodious, which is a decent deck. And Vision Hero Trinity might see play over time if the hero deck gains a little bit in popularity. In Supreme Darkness, the deck is getting more support, so maybe people are going to be playing it a little more. I don't think it's going to change that much, but if anything, Trinity could be decent. even without Trinity, Super Poly is still a decent card overall against hero. You can fuse away all of their dark monsters, even summon something like Trifew Verdum, so I think these are very low priority. Like I said, if you need to prioritize anything, it's always going to be Garura, Mudragon, Dragostapeli, and Starving Venom. So yeah, Super Poly can be at 99% efficiency with these 3 targets, and 100% efficiency, or at least 99.999% with Starving Venom on top of that. Everything else is just extra fluff, you know, cherry on the cake, not super needed, but good to have. And also, last but not least, kind of least in a way, Protostar Dragon of the Void. This only exists in the OCG at the moment. I think it's coming out in Rage of the Abyss, I'm not sure. It requires a light or dark dragon monster and any dragon monster, so it could be good against dragon decks overall, but not super generic. And finally, Magistus Corozo. It requires a Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, or Link, and any spellcaster monster. And it also has 2 ways of being summoned, either by actually fusion summoning it, or by contact fusing using a bunch of materials on like your, a bunch of monster cards. So even if they're like in the spell and trap zone, you can still use them in order to summon this. It's not treated as a fusion summon, but it's still a proper summon. You know, this is how contact fusion works in Yu-Gi-Oh! It's really complicated. That's the reason why there's no Ritual Beast fusion monster in there, even though you might want to believe that the Ritual Beast fusions would be good against Ritual Beast. They're not, because you cannot Super Poly into them, since they have to be summoned by their own summoning condition, which is contact fusing. This is always how contact fusing typically works in Yu-Gi-Oh! I mean, almost always. This one, it has 2 summoning conditions, so that's why it's different. Yeah, that's it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And let me know how you feel about Super Poly in the comment section below, and I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.